Okay, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. My name's David, and we're going to have a little bit of a look at the worldview of Islam today. And as I said earlier, we're running 9 of these different worldviews sessions, all tasters, designed to be about 45 minutes to an hour. Probably will be nearer 45, I would say, which is long enough after a tough day at school, and we do appreciate you coming along. Okay. Yes, the presentation is going to be recorded and will be uploaded onto the Jigsaw RE portal, so you'll be able to have access to it if you're a Jigsaw school. And it's great to have this library of training that we will continue to add to as the year goes on. Okay. So, a little bit about me. My name's David. I'm the Jigsaw RE program lead at the moment. I was a secondary RE teacher and leader for 25 years, and I was, for every single day of that, I was in an RE department of 1. And so the idea of actually meeting together with other RE leaders was quite literally manna from heaven. It was great to be able to meet and discuss and talk. So I did that for 25 years, and I thought, to be honest, I'd do the whole 40 years. But the opportunity came to be involved with writing for Discovery RE back in 2011, 2012. And after that, came out and decided to try and help primary colleagues, realizing that you guys teach absolutely everything and you don't have a lot of help with RE. So through a lovely winding road, we've now ended up as the co-lead of the marvelous Jigsaw RE program, which I helped to write a little bit of too. So I also do some CPD training and mentoring, been an advisor, and I'm still an advisor for SACRAES, RE QM assessor, and I have done some examining with AQA. So that's enough about me, just so that you know, for all my career, which is going on for a whopping 40 years now, I've been in the world of RE. I love it. So this is what we're going to do today. It's basically a bit of a starter for 10 of knowledge to do with the religion and worldview. So we're going to look at the basics required to teach the inquiries that we cover in Jigsaw RE. But even if you're not using Jigsaw RE, the content that we're looking at today, it's all the sort of thing that you will be teaching anyway. And a summary of this, the information we look at today is available for you to keep. Will be sent to you, and it's a really nice little document, sort of summarising the key beliefs and practices and so on. And that's available for you and for your staff as a PDF. And we'll send that out to you probably tomorrow or very soon. Now, one of the things we always talk about here, and this reflects a big change in what's happened in RE in the last few years, is a note about diversity. There is a significant amount of diversity around, as we know, but there's also diversity within tradition. So if we're going to look at Islam today, there's lots and lots of different schools of thought. So it's very difficult for us to say that something would represent the entire Muslim community, because to be honest, it just can't do that, because everybody is unique. So if you go and talk to 2 Muslims, same as you would 2 Christians, 2 Buddhists, you will find that even if they identify as having similar beliefs, how they choose to put these ideas into practice is individual to them. And it's based on lots and lots of different things. And this is what we now call the worldview approach. And this has been adopted by many of the locally agreed syllabuses around the country. And I think people are quite comfortable with this now, recognizing that you have an individual point of view, and therefore, when you're speaking to people from a worldview, they will have their own slant on it too. So we cannot cover everything, and we would not claim to do so. But what we will say is that we will give you some pointers towards some of the core things, but we'll also strongly encourage you to reach out locally to people from within these worldviews who have that lived experience. Because we can talk to you about knowledge, we can talk to you about what people do, but we can't talk to you about how these people feel about it and how that impacts on their daily lives. That's where you need a combination of the knowledge and that lived experience. And that's really, really important in the world of RE at the moment. So we're going to cover what the basics are, and we're going to look at some common topics that are covered in a variety of different resource providers, but of course, Jigsaw RE primarily. And what we're also going to do is show how you can put some of these ideas across to children. As I said, the PDF takeaway will be sent to you. And there'll be some examples from our inquiries, which hopefully will be useful for you to see. Whether you choose to come on board or not, it's entirely up to you. But we have free materials that you can see. There's all sorts of trials going on, and it's well worth having a look. Much in the same way as if you were shopping, you'd try a variety of things. You wouldn't just plump for the first thing off the shelf. So come and have a look, see if we can help. So let's start. We have the fact that Islam is monotheistic. Now, I know that's a big word, and it's a bit of an old-fashioned word, but what we've been trying to say in the RE world in the last few years is we need to get children used to some of these big words, some of the religious literacy. This might be one of the words that you choose to do. So although there are many different groups or schools of thought, as we call in Islam, with different beliefs about certain things, they all agree that Allah is God. And here you can see at the bottom of the page the Arabic word for Allah. So if you're looking at a variety of bits of calligraphy or so on, if you go to a mosque and visit, it's one of the nice things to do is to be able to look along the calligraphy. If you don't know the language of Arabic, you'll be able to spot where Allah is written. So there is one God, and God is the most important part of their lives. I've spoken to Muslims about this, and they said, yeah, family and everything is all super important. Of course it is, but Allah has to come first. So they will always treat the name of Allah with respect. And what you will see, and it is something that's really important to be mindful of, is that to disrespect Allah is deeply offensive. Now, we all know we live in a world now where people are offended left, right, and center. And to be offended by something is a choice that you make. But we know that some people, when offended, will take some action. We've seen instances around the country where unfortunate offence has mistakenly been given and people have been protesting and so on. So one of the key things that we try to do when teaching Islam is to get some of these basic ideas out right at the beginning so that these sort of mistakes aren't made. So Allah's name is always to be respected, and it is offensive to Muslims if it's not shown respect. There are 99 names or attributes of Allah which are mentioned throughout the Quran. And these are, as I say, they're attributes. So they're things like the light, the perfect judge, all that sort of thing. There's lots of little indications about what Allah brings to humanity, what sort of things that a Muslim would go to Allah for assistance for. If you are the light, the idea there, of course, a light in the darkness means that you can see where you're going. And if you imagine going through life as going through a room in the dark, bumping into all sorts of obstacles, then you put the light on and all of a sudden things are better. So Allah is the only God and deserves total respect because of all the things he has done, does today, and of course will do in the future. So for Muslims, Allah is a living God, a God that has done so much, is still imminent now, is here, and is, of course, going to be stretching into the future. And it's going to play a massively important role in their lives. So I mentioned earlier about unexpectedly or unintentionally causing offense. And one of the ways in which this can happen is by in some RE lessons, some RE teachers have asked children to draw gods from many different worldviews, and they've attempted to do this with Islam. And this is a straight no, don't go there, don't do this. And there's a very simple reason for it. And it's this that we need to get across. Allah is above comparison. So to compare Allah with anything is offensive because nothing can possibly be as good. It's just too big a concept. So to picture Allah would be to compare something to him which is deeply disrespectful. So it might just be that as a child you might sort of try and draw the idea of what you think a God might be like. And you can do that in plenty of worldviews, but not in Islam, because you would be unintentionally causing offense. Because the minute you put some sort of form down that represents Allah, you weaken the power. Because physical things cannot have total power. We have our physical bodies, they break. Allah is not physical. Allah is just Allah. So it's one of those things that I think is just really important for us to come to terms with right at the start, so that we know, okay, we'll just don't go there. And it's important to explain why. So Muslims believe that when you die, there is a judgment day. And you might think, well, why are we talking about death now? That's a bit grim. Well, because everything in life points towards that ultimate destination. Life on earth is a test. Muslims believe that Allah gives you tests throughout your life, and you are to try and pass these tests. There will be help available, but there will be decisions to be made, and it's your choice of what you do, and the consequences of those must be, accepted. So Allah, who perfect justice, one of the 99 attributes, will decide on your next step after looking at all the evidence collected during your life. And this evidence, which of course would be thoughts, words, and deeds, is collected by two angels. And when Muslims pray, part of the rak'ah, the prayer positions, they will acknowledge to the angel on one side and the angel on the other, just recognizing and just sort of realizing that everything is being watched. Ultimately, it will have a consequence for your afterlife. But because Allah is fair and just, what happens to you should be what you deserve. Now, if you lived your life with that in mind, and particularly if you look at the quote from the Quran at the top, Allah sees all you do, that Muslims have reminders throughout their life that they're not really going to get away with anything. So you might as well try and do the right thing, because ultimately what you want when you die is a pleasant, peaceful, heavenly type afterlife. And that will be decided on. So it's always, I think, whenever you're looking at Islam for the first time, you start with Allah and you start with some of those basic things, because everything sort of slots into place after that. If you have one God who is perfect, who cannot be compared to anything else, who is with you but watching you, and who will decide your fate when you die, you have that at the core. Then you think, okay, when it comes to living your life, you're going to need certain guidance about how to behave, and you'll need to find where that guidance is in the Quran or the Hadith, and we'll come to that in a moment. And you have that at the start. So you've got now a bit of an idea about how Muslims will approach life. They will want to keep Allah pleased, happy with them, because Allah's given them this life, and everything that's in that life will be afforded to them by Allah. And they want to be grateful for that. They want to make the best of that. And they want to not let him down. So then, usually I go, okay, so we've got this as a basis. Now we need to start to think about how this all came about. Because quite a lot of the time with the major world religions and the worldviews, there's a little bit of there's a moment in history where something happened, something changed. And we need to recognize whether this is the case in here. It's the case in most. It's not the case when it comes to Sanatana Dharma, formerly known as Hinduism. That's a sort of a different evolutionary type thing. But Islam is one of these religions where there is a moment, there is a time where things changed, going from what had come before to this new religion. So this surrounds the Prophet Muhammad. And as you can see there, I've got the words, the Knight of Power. So let's have a little bit of a look and see what happened here. Now, the story of the Prophet Muhammad is a really interesting one, because what you often find with a religion or a worldview is the people who start this are not often the people that you would expect. And Muhammad is certainly the case. This is not somebody who was looking for um, a religious vocation. He wasn't looking for this at all. He was just living his life as an honest, ordinary working man. But around him, people weren't, and he was concerned about this. So basically, there's a long story, and it ends up with him receiving Allah's words, which form the Quran. So it began as an organized religion when the Prophet Muhammad set out Allah's wishes. And this began after Muhammad was visited by the angel Jibril, or Gabriel, on the night of power. And these visits continued for over 20 years, and the messages became the Quran, the holy book. Now, it's a really, really interesting story as to how Muhammad was chosen and how the night of power actually came about. And I can't remember if it's on the next slide, so I'm just going to keep going, and then I'll tell you in a minute. But he is seen as a really, really important man because Islam starts with him gathering these teachings from the angel and passing them on. And being fortunate in one sense that some close people to him, very, very notably, and most importantly, his wife Khadija, because if she hadn't believed him, he would have had a problem. But she gave him an awful lot of strength. So that's a very important, strong woman at the beginning of Islam. His name is treated with such respect that whenever Muslims say or write it, they include a blessing, peace be upon him, which is often shortened to PBUH. So although he's key to the formation of the Quran, he didn't write it. However, the words and example of the Prophet were collected by his followers and are known as the Hadith. And the Hadith are very important as Muhammad gives instructions on how to follow Allah's words. However, the Quran, obviously, is much more important. A little bit more on that to come in a moment. So the Quran contains Allah's actual words in the original language of Arabic. So Muslims believe that Allah chose Arabic as the language to use. Now that's significant because that would tell Muslims that if Allah chose this particular language, then he must have had a good reason for it, and that would encourage them to learn it. So say you're a British Muslim and you're brought up, you're learning English and whatever else. English is a very, very different language to Arabic, totally different. So many Muslims will, if they don't learn Arabic, they are relying on a translation. And whenever you translate anything from one language to another, you lose meaning. You lose that sort of lyrical, poetic quality. But if you're a Muslim, and I'd imagine if I was a Muslim, I'd be thinking, well, hang on a minute, he's chosen Arabic. I live in England. I speak English, but I'd really want to know what he means. I don't really want to look at a translation. The only way you can do that is to learn Arabic yourself. So for many Muslims who are born into countries where Arabic isn't the first language, they will try and learn it because they want to understand what the original Quran is saying. So it's split up into 114 different chapters, which are called surahs, and they're not like in chronological order. They all have a separate name. They're actually ordered in length. After the first one, they're ordered in length from, I think, longest to shortest. And the Quran is treated with massive respect. And many Muslims, as I say, will learn Arabic specifically to understand the writings. But you'll also notice there in the photograph, and these photographs and images are all taken from jigsaw materials, and they're all ones that you're able to use. You'll see how the Quran is on a kursi, it's on a stand. That just affords the book an extra respect, and we'll talk about why in a moment. Now, this is where we go back to the night of power, because the word Quran comes from the Arabic verb qura, meaning to recite. And the story goes that the Prophet Muhammad, he was coming up to around about 40, that time in your life where you start to wonder about, is this it? What am I going to do with the rest of my life? My youth's behind me. And, he's a working man. He's not an educated man, but he has these same questions like the rest of us do. Why am I here? What am I doing? Is this that I'm getting older? What's going to happen? And so he used to take himself away to a cave on Mount Hira to have a good old think about things. And apparently one day, whilst trying to sort his problems out, the angel Gabriel appears to him and gives him a whole bunch more problems. It's basically saying, right, you've been chosen by God. And of course, Muhammad's there on his own. You can imagine the impact those words are going to have on him and anyone he potentially tells. And the angel says, I'm going to hold up a scroll and I want you to read it. And Muhammad goes, well, I can't. I'm a shepherd. I don't need to read or write. And the angel goes, no, you misunderstand. You, Muhammad, me, angel, you will read this scroll. And this goes on two or three times before finally, apparently, the words, so story goes, are sort of, he feels it burnt into his heart and he's able to recite the words. And the angel says, right, this is going to happen from now on. You're going to come to this cave and I'm going to keep telling you things. And you're going to go off and tell people. Because God isn't happy with what's going on. They've gone away from him and they need to be brought back, and you're going to tell them how to do it. Now that, throughout history, is not a job that gives a great deal of security, because nobody likes to be told they're not doing the right thing. But that's what happened. So his first problem, of course, he goes home and has to tell his wife. And imagine if I went home and said to my wife that the angel Gabriel had appeared to me and given me a message. She might take some convincing, but apparently Khadijah was, oh, okay, right, okay, let's work on this. So the whole idea was that the angel recited the words of the Quran to the Prophet Muhammad. Now Muhammad couldn't read or write, so he then told other people who wrote them down. And so what we end up with is that the word Quran, meaning recital, is remembering the fact that this direct message of God's word through the angel Gabriel to the Prophet Muhammad. So he couldn't read or write, and that wasn't a problem back then because, as I said, not many people had access to education, and he was not a wealthy man. He worked, and so it wasn't something that he needed to do. So because the Quran is seen as being the actual word of Allah given to humanity, Muslims will want this book treated with huge respect. And it's respected in many ways, including, as I say, being put on a stand when it's used so it's not overtouched. Because our fingers have little bits of grease on them, depending on what you've been doing with them, obviously. But we have natural sort of moisture, and that will make the paper deteriorate. So you just make sure that you're putting it on a stamp. When it's not used, it's wrapped in a clean cloth, and it's not read. It should be the highest book in the room. Never placed on the floor, and you wash your hands before touching it. So the idea here is that you're getting yourself ready to be in the presence of the Word of God. And as you do that, you're trying to park your daily problems so that you can focus on being with God. Much in the same way as when Muslims pray, they will have had a fairly extensive washing program beforehand. All of this is about, I'm getting ready to be with God. So Muslims believe that the Quran gives information on how to live life the way Allah would want. But we have to recognize here that we're going back in time. The Quran is probably put together at around about 630 CE, so we're talking 1400 years ago now. Times have changed. There's going to be a whole bunch of things that are issues in society that weren't mentioned in the Quran. So Muslims will have to look at what the Quran say and interpret certain things in certain situations. And this is again where differences will come. You'll have quotes from the Quran that one Muslim will interpret in one way and another will interpret in a completely different. Muslims want to achieve paradise when they die, and the Quran offers them guidance on how to achieve this. And because Muslims are not allowed to draw pictures representing Allah, they sometimes use beautiful writing called calligraphy to show Allah respect. And you can see at the pictures of the Quran and the Arabic at the bottom of the page, just it is a very beautiful sort of script and it's often turned into lots of different pictures and decorations in books, and particularly on the outside of mosques. So this calligraphy often consists of verses from the Quran. So when it comes to diversity, we tend to use the term schools of thought within Islam. I've spoken to many Muslims over the years who have basically said this. This is much happier with this than to like groups or divisions or whatever. So they recognize there are some similarities and differences between Muslims, and many beliefs are common, but there are some key differences. And it's important to let students know that there are different views within Islam. Usually, though, when you're looking at books or websites or whatever, you will find information about either Sunni or Shia. Sunni predominantly because it's the largest group globally. These are Muslims who believe in the successorship of Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali as leaders of the Muslim community after the Prophet Muhammad. Now, this isn't necessarily something you need to worry about when you're teaching, particularly young ones. But the main disagreements, I suppose, or differences come with what happened after Muhammad died. Who should follow on? And there are different people who think different people should have been the ones to follow. And sometimes these discussions and divisions can be quite heated. And you have some groups that just don't recognize each other. But I mean, that's the same the world over. Shia, this is another group that you'll have heard quite a lot of. And Shia comes from the phrase means followers of Ali. And they believe that Ali directly succeeded the Prophet Muhammad. As I say, nothing for us to worry too much about. It's just to make sure that we're saying to students, there's no one way of doing this. You'll have some things like the whole business to do with Allah and the Quran that they agree on, but other bits to do with practice that we'll come on to in a moment that they don't. There are also other sort of minority schools of thought, including the Sufis, or a very mystical form of Islam, and Ahmadiyya, which quite a lot of Sunni and Shia Muslims don't recognize at all. And that's because they believe the prophet that came after Muhammad, whereas for all the other groups, Muhammad is known as the seal of the prophets. He's the final one, and none were to follow. Ahmadiyya say that there was one to follow. Hence, there's a little bit of disagreement there. Having just spoken about diversity, though, one thing that's very important within Islam is the concept of ummah. And ummah means the worldwide community of Muslims, recognizing that wherever you are in the world, you are part of a brotherhood or sisterhood of Muslims all around the world who will have similar beliefs and practices and hopes, dreams, wishes, aims, and so on. So there's no living leader of that. This is just sort of an unofficial brother and sisterhood. Allah is the only one to follow. But the Ummah aims to promote the welfare of everyone in the Muslim community. And one of the key things they try to lock into is this idea of equality. And here you can see is a great picture. There's Muslims from all financial backgrounds, walks of life in this photograph, but they are all prostrating themselves in front of Allah equally. And it's an important message to learn, because our societies around the world do create tiers in which people are seen as being different. All are equal in the eyes of Allah is in the Quran. Now, the pillars, and these are things that you will often see when teaching, and it's important to recognize that there are differences in practices here. So the 5 pillars that we often talk about, which tend to refer to Sunni Muslims, the majority group. Shia Muslims have other duties too, called the 10 obligatory acts, which include some of the ones that you will be looking at, but have some slightly different variations, practices, and so on. And the first one, which I always used to find in a way the most difficult to teach, because it's such it's not a specific, it's not something you can hang your hat on. I will see way. Shahada comes from the word shaheed, meaning sacrifice. This talking about sacrificing your life to God, putting God first, making sure that you're not being selfish. So there's a statement, and it's in the yellow there. There is one God, Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. Very short, very sweet, very simple. Said multiple times a day, just as a little reminder to you about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And key times they do it, first thing in the morning. Because when you wake up first thing in the morning, your mind isn't at its sharpest. And we struggle to hop out of bed and become immediately focused. But if you are saying something like that, you're thinking, okay, I might not feel like it, but there is one God, Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. So I'm beginning my day and I'm starting about how best I can follow Allah and get the best out of this day. Should also be the first words said to a newborn baby and the last words, if possible, to a dying person. But as we all know, death doesn't always make an appointment. So some of the other pillars, things that you will almost certainly teach. Prayer, very significant. 5 times a day. And these prayers are basically saying that life revolves around God. There are 5 specific times or sort of time slots where it can be done. And it could be seen as being inconvenient to people outside. You think, well, you have to get up in the morning to pray and then go back to bed. But that is to say, well, hang on a minute, self-discipline is really important in Islam. It's really important in life in general, as we know. So you need to have some little alarm calls. Most of us need an alarm call in the morning. We wouldn't necessarily, particularly this time of year, wake up and think, oh, let's get out of bed. It's 6:30. No, of course not. So we need those reminders. Prayer is a reminder. It's a reminder to you to give thanks to God for all God has done. There'll also be opportunities for personal prayer, for things that you would like to ask if someone is ill, or if you're seeking some guidance or support, or all the things that you would go to prayer for. You can still do that, but there are also set things to say and set movements to do. It requires self-discipline, but as I say, that is something we do need. Zakah, giving. 2.5% of annual savings, not earnings, is a difference there to charity. And this is usually organised through the local mosque. There are Muslim charities. You can go online to see Muslim Aid, all sorts of things that do great work around the world. But usually quite a lot of your money goes to that local community because there'll be people in need there. And it's quite an old school. And to be honest, I think it's a good thing. You always used to do this. You'd have your communities looking after each other. But as we've all spread out a bit, that seems to have gone a little bit. But in Islam, they do try to make sure that happens. You can also give of your own accord differently, and this is called sadaqah, and that's extra. Whereas zakah is a duty. You need to do that. It is effectively a tax. But it's one you're happy to pay because you're a Muslim, you are saying, Allah has given me this money. I need to use it wisely. I need to use it in a way that he will approve of. And helping others is at the root of that. Fasting during the month of Ramadan. Well, the month of Ramadan is the month in which the Quran was first given to Muhammad. So it's recognizing the importance of that particular month. But why to fast? Fasting is hard work. And within Islam, it's really hard. Because the Islamic calendar is 354 days, it means that these festivals will not fall at the same time every year. So for fasting during Ramadan, they will fast during the hours of daylight. Now, this in the summer months is no mean feat. And if you're thinking just in, say, like in the UK, you might be looking at a 17, 18-hour day with no food, no water, nothing. That's going to take some doing, and your body does not approve of that sort of thing. It will complain. Plus, you'd be surrounded by the temptation of eating all the time. Now, no one's going to check up on you. This is you proving to yourself and to God that you can do it. But as a process of doing this, you are recognizing what it is like for people who are genuinely poor every day and do not know where their next meal is coming from. And as humans, we very rarely understand something unless we go through it. Sad fact. However, some people this would be unwise. If you are sick, if you're a child, if you're pregnant, if you're old, these would be potentially damaging to your health, and that would make it pointless. Allah does not want people suffering like that. It needs to be something that you are fit and healthy and able to do. And for sort of children coming into their teens and above, the choice is theirs. They can do the whole month, where during daylight hours they do not eat, or they could just do one day. That is up to them. But the minute you can tell the difference between a black and a white thread, that's light. When it then gets dark, you are allowed to eat. And every day there's a sort of mini celebration. You don't overdo it with the food, of course, because you won't be able to digest it. But you often will find that Muslims will be eating sort of healthy things like figs and dates, things that are stuffed full of slow release energy stuff. And it's, at the end of the month, there's a festival, Eid al-Fitr. So it is a time where it is difficult, it is challenging, it develops self-discipline, self-control, gives you empathy for the poor. But at the end of it, of course, there would be a celebration that you had supported each other and been able to do that. That's what the Eid festival is. The other pillar that we focus on here is the Hajj pilgrimage. And there are other places to go as well. So for Shia Muslims, it's Kaaba. But for most Muslims, Mecca is the place that you associate with pilgrimage. And it's a major undertaking. It goes on every year, but you only have to go once in your lifetime. And now it is such a well-attended event, they have to actually control the numbers going in and out, because it's over 2 million people every year descend on the city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia, which from an infrastructure point of view is a colossal thing. They do tend to spend the entire year either getting ready for it or recovering from it. It's such a massive thing. Now, you can go at other times of the year, but it's a lesser pilgrimage, which is called Umrah. But there's a certain time during the month of Dhul Hijjah where there's a 5 or 6 day period where Muslims are expected to go. And the little guide you can see on the bottom left-hand corner shows you that there's a number of different places that they go to. And each time they go to somewhere, they will do separate things. So, for example, if you see on the right-hand side at the bottom, lovely picture of the Kaaba, a cube-shaped building in the center of the great mosque in Mecca. And there you can see that people are fanning around it. Actually, they're sort of praying, facing it. Whenever a Muslim prays anywhere in the world, it is to that building that they are praying. So when they're praying, they will often have a compass to help them, because if in my route where I am now, I would not know where Mecca was if I was a Muslim. But to give me a compass and a prayer mat, I can find that. So that's the only place in the world where if you're a Muslim, you can pray in that direction there. And when you're inside the Kaaba, which very few people do go, and it's the only place in the world where you can pray in any direction because you're in it. But the reason why they're all fanned out like that is one of the first things they'll do is they'll walk 7 times anti-clockwise around the Kaaba in something that's called tawaf. And it's to show that their life revolves around God. There's deep symbolism here. And this place apparently is the site of the oldest pilgrimage site, one of the first shrines that apparently the prophet Adam, from Adam and Eve, was supposed to have built many, many thousands of years ago. So they'll want to follow in the footsteps of Muhammad and some of the prophets that came before. And there's just lots and lots of things that they do. It's a really interesting event. And if you were a Muslim to stand there, must be quite something else. Because if you're not a Muslim, you're not allowed there at all. It's one of the few places in the world where certain people are just not allowed in. And we would just get in the way. I'd love to go, but I'd just be in the way. Of course I would. I recognize that. So back to prayer. Most Muslims will pray 5 times a day, ranging from early in the morning to last thing at night. And prayer is saying thanks to God. And they want to thank God for life and everything. So the life is built around worship of Allah through prayer. And the number of prayers was set as part of another journey that Muhammad took called the night journey, sort of a mystical journey up into the heavens where he's supposed to have met many of the prophets like Moses. And the story goes that Muhammad said, how many prayers a day should we have? Should we have 50 And Moses said, no, 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 let's just rein it in a bit. 5 will be fine. And that's how the story goes. So these 5 daily prayers mean that Muslims pray as a community. You can pray at home. You can pray at work. If you're a Muslim school, you can pray there. You can pray anywhere, because if you have a clean place, all you need is a prayer mat, as you see in the photographs at the bottom, and your compass, so that you know, and you need the ability to either wash or symbolically wash beforehand your external parts of your body, and you're good to go. And it's a great symbol of equality to see all these people praying side by side. And if you go to Muslim countries, you'll see them praying in the road or by the road and so on. Yeah. Prayer helps develop self-discipline, and it's key to Muslims, and we've mentioned that a few times. Putting Allah at the center of their lives and never forgetting what He's done for them. And there's the mat and compass, as I mentioned, to make sure you know where the Kaaba is. So you're not worshipping the Kaaba. You're just bowing your head in recognition to the place where it all began. Now, the mosque can be a center of worship and community. And depending where you are, of course, you may well have a purpose-built mosque like the one you see in the picture there, which I think was in Slough. Or you might have, as we have down my way, we've got a converted a building. I was actually once a fire station, I believe. That's the main mosque, not far from me. It doesn't matter. It can be converted. What is important is that community space. So although it is used as a place of prayer, particularly on a Friday sort of lunchtime prayer is the one that's seen as the most important during the week. So many Muslims will try to go then. But it has lots of community activities going on as well. There's little libraries in there, so you would be able to find Qurans and sort of learn more about it. As I said earlier, if you were in the UK or somewhere else, you might think, well, how am I going to learn Arabic? Well, the mosque will help you there. They run a school called a madrasa, which is often run after school for children. So they'll go from sort of mainstream school into the madrasa, do a little bit of that, and then they'll go off home. And they're taught about the Quran there. And it helps develop a sense of belonging. Having a place to meet, to get together, does help with that sense of belonging, and also just helps them if they're going through a tough time. Meeting with others encourages you. Just every now and again, we live increasingly virtual lives, but just every now and again, a face-to-face just helps us sort of get that human touch. So before you go into the prayer hall, there'll be some washing, and then when you go into the prayer hall, there's no furniture in there because everyone's on the carpeted floor. Everyone's facing this particular wall, which points towards the direction of the Kaaba, and the walls called the mihrab, and the Qibla wall, but the mihrab points towards Mecca. In order to remind people to go to prayer, you will see in the photograph there's some towers called minarets, and originally these were all designed so that, much in the same way as church bell towers would clang to remind people that it was time to go to worship, the muezzin, the prayer caller, would go up and go, come to prayer, come to prayer. And first thing in the morning, when people were asleep, there's the extra line that says, come to prayer, prayer is better than sleep. And you may not feel like that, but yeah, off you go. Now, many mosques in non-Muslim societies, as I said, are converted buildings. And inside, there's usually a minbar, which is a platform on top of some stairs for the imam or prayer leader to stand on when he gives his sermon. There's also the mihrab, which points towards Mecca. So you've got all that sorted out for you. And the washrooms are there too. Have I just gone backwards? Strange. We've gone back to the Hajj. So I think we've actually covered most of this. Yes, we have. Slight error there. But the reason why they really want to make such a big thing of the Hajj is to commemorate the fact that the success of Islam starts with the events that happened here. And there's many, many different prophets and people involved. So there's stories about Abraham, and there's stories about Ishmael. There's stories about people that you'd recognize and know. And they're all going through basically the history of how Islam started, but significantly how it became as important as it is because plenty of other religions came and went and haven't got the followers that Islam has. And one of the key things I don't think I mentioned here is that many, when they're there, they tend to wear the same things. They will have the white robes called ihram, which is just to mention the fact that all, again, are equal in the eyes of Allah. So here you can see just a little bit more to say about some of the places that they go to. So sorry about that prayer one being out of sequence. So some of the places they go to, like Al-Safa and Al-Marwa, they run between two hills to commemorate the time Hajar was looking for some water for her son. And apparently he dug his heel in the ground and a spring of Zamzam came up as a miracle to save them from almost certain death. They'll travel to Mina and they'll go to Muzdalifah and they'll collect stones. And at Mina there are 3 stone pillars which represent the devil. And the devil is apparently supposed to have tempted Abraham, and Abraham rejected him. And so Muslims will throw stones at the pillars to reject devil in a symbolic way that I suppose all of us every day have to think about doing the right thing and avoiding the wrong thing. And the pilgrimage ends with an animal sacrifice. Meat divided up amongst everyone is eaten to show that both rich and poor are equal to Allah. There are other places you can go to. You could visit Medina, the place where the Prophet Muhammad is buried. And as I say, if you look at the photograph at the bottom, you can see how people are dressed in white. You will have some of the very, very rich people there and some incredibly poor people there. No one wants to be made to feel inadequate while they're there. So they all pretty much look the same, symbolizing equality and actually living it. Very, very important. So I'll just pick up the pace a bit here because I've just noticed I've gone on a bit. Sorry about that. We have some stuff on jihad here. Jihad is an interesting topic, and it's one that I used to teach at secondary, and it might not come up. But basically, if you can just think of the word jihad as being a personal struggle, and often against evil. The word really to focus on here is struggle. We know that life is tricky. We know that there are challenges that come our way. We know that we have to fight our own natures sometimes about the things that we're doing or thinking. And this is what's known as a greater jihad. It's an inner struggle against our own laziness, impatience, and arrogance. And it reflects a Muslim's wish to live a life that will please Allah. So that's what the greater jihad is. But there's other interpretations of jihad too, including this, the lesser one. And this one is an outer struggle. So if greater is an inner, personal one, lesser is an outer one. And it's against what you might call the forces of evil. And this is one where we have to be mindful of the differences in interpretation. Because if you're fighting against what you see as an external evil, fighting can be done in a variety of ways. It can be done violently, non-violently, passively, actively. There's lots of different ways you can do this. But if you thought somebody was attacking your religion and your religion was from God, you might not just lie over and take that. And so in some cases, some Muslims have taken extreme action and been prepared to die and to kill others for their beliefs. They're not the only religion and worldview to do this, but they're the one that certainly gets the most media space about this. So we just have to be careful here, because many schools of thought in Islam really do not like the idea of taking another life. It is not something that's in the Quran. However, you are supposed to defend yourself. And the difficulty is where do you draw that line? Now, what we've seen, and certainly in the last 20 to 25 years, the media has had a bit of a field day with various incidents of Muslims being seen as being violent. And what we have to do is to make sure that we don't leave this unchallenged. We do have to recognize there is some violence. There are some difficult interpretations that have led to acts that we might disagree with, but it is not representative of the whole of Islam. And we just have to make sure that our children who will hear this from home and from social media are challenged by this and say, that's not everyone. That doesn't speak for everyone. Yes, it's some, but it's certainly not all. And RE is the space to have these conversations. We have to recognize that people interpret things in a variety of different ways. So how do we go about explaining this, and what resources can we offer? Well, just going to show you a few things in Jigsaw. As I said, no hard sell here. These are the inquiries that we have. Now, if you were a Discovery RE school in the past, going back over a decade, you will see some of these questions are very similar. And basically what we've done is taken these and evolved them, brought them up to date with some of the new things that have happened in RE. So we'll start with a range of questions that going from Key Stage 1 right the way through to the end of Key Stage 2. And of course, there'll be aspects in EYFS as well. But who is God to Muslims? Our first inquiry. We'll be dealing with some of those core things about what they believe about Allah and the impact that would have. And then you can see how it develops to go through Muhammad and the Quran. And then we start to talk about daily life and commitment and the idea of belonging. And this, as you can see, if you look at these, they're getting more and more complicated in a way, ending with this idea of akhirah and life after death, and how might that impact on your daily life. So these are the 9 inquiries that we've got. We cover all of these things, quite a lot of things I've gone through today. So yeah. But what we've tried to do as well, we've moved away from the idea of hard copy folders. Everything's on a portal now, which is good because it means we can update things as we need to. And the world of RE changes all the time. So we're always refining and tweaking things and adding content. So we've got some new graphics. We've got plenty of knowledge. Jigsaw RE is actually set up to give you too much. You have to make sure you're aware of what your locally agreed syllabus does. But we've got photos and images from our graphics team. We have information gathered from lived experience. We talked to many Muslims when we were putting this stuff together and had it okayed by them. And a range of activities and stimuli, looking variety of lenses, because we know some syllabuses go through the multidisciplinary lens and the worldviews approach. So each inquiry will have slideshows with clear learning intentions and images, and they're color-coded to show some of the different bits of assessment that we're looking at. There's the ability to add slides and make links to suitable film, role models, etc. So here's just a few examples of some activities. A head and tail activity aimed at showing the significance of key moments in Muhammad's life, and also there on the right is part of the story itself. So we give you the story and also give you the exercises to go with it. So every inquiry has activities for lessons, but also for assessments. So here's a sequencing activity showing the significance of key moments in Muhammad's life. You can see him there again say, I can't read. How can I possibly write this stuff down? Yeah, just interesting to see which bits of the story the children think perhaps might be the most significant part. We have vocab mats, cards, and glossary sorted out by our excellent team, because we have a team of people who are fresh out of the classroom that have been writing this. We have formative assessments to check the pictures we're going along, as well as summative assessment at the end. And again, we say to people, use what you need. You don't need it all, but we'd much rather you had too much stuff. If you want to focus on part of it, that's grand, up to you. And we'll give you a bit of a hand on how to mark it as well. And we've got specific background information sheets and knowledge organizers for every inquiry. And that's to help you as staff up your knowledge. And it's just to give you something to refer to before you read it. This inquiry is about this. This is what you might need to remember. This is what you're going to do. And we think that's just really helpful, because we recognize, as I say, that you're teaching everything else. Now, as for today, all the stuff we've been through, and that is quite a lot, I think you'll agree, I've just woken some of you up there, is provided on a PDF document, which we will send out to you super soon. So everything I've gone on about is in there, neatly popped into little sections, as you see there. And that's just our gift to you. If you want more subject knowledge, if you go onto our portal, you will be able to find there's a training area. So we've got various things that we've recorded in the past, and there's also a list of all the things coming up in the future. So there's lots of different video clips there, often about how to use it, looking at worldviews approach. There's all sorts of things in there, how to be an RE leader as well. And finally, we have a whole bunch of other things that we do. We have the Jigsaw PSHE. We have that for 3 to 12 and 11 to 16. We have an outdoors program, we have a families program, and we have games. Come and have a look at the website, check things out, get in touch if you want to. But what we're trying to do at Jigsaw is not only produce and provide materials, we're trying to say to you, we're also here to help you with your background knowledge. We're here to support you with this. We don't just believe in selling stuff, we look after people. So we're really pleased that you come along to a session like this to try and sort of increase your knowledge. We want to be able to be here to help you through this, because teaching about a worldview can be a little bit daunting when you think, I don't have a lot of experience or background in this. How do I do this? We can help you with that. So I thank you ever so much for coming along today. And for those of you that stayed till the very end, thank you for that. Don't forget, we have others coming up very soon. I have a lovely selection of worldviews that we're going through. And if you think we've missed something, then obviously do get in touch. And we'll send you the handout very shortly. So thank you very much for coming. I wish you all a very good evening.